Hello.
Hello.
Hopefully there's no confusion for folks because there are two calendar invites.
There are two what?
At least there are two invites on my calendar, one at this time and one for the next hour.
I think that one for the next hour must be just local on your calendar. You should probably just delete it.
Okay.
So I deleted the entire, I removed the old iCal, the whole old Google calendars because it was just to make sure that, but of course, if people imported them, they're still sitting on their local calendars.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. I think it seems like this time actually is a little bit too early for the folks in California, but will actually be able to, is good for folks in India and Europe.
Yeah, I mean, it was originally scheduled for 9, but then I guess when it got put into the Linux Foundation tools, it got associated with, I don't know, UTC or something, so that when the time zone changes here in California, the time of the meeting changes when we get, go off daylight savings time. So that's why it changed. And at this point, we just don't want to touch it, but it's not a great time for me. It's okay for me. 8:30 would be better for me, but it's hard to change these things when everybody's
geographically distributed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the morning times at 8 o'clock, or if you have kids who are going to school, that's when the problem happens.
Exactly. Like I had to drop my daughter like, half an hour before school to get here on time.
So John, when the DST changes, I mean, obviously in March, do you think this will go back to the original one?
It'll flip back to 9 a.m., which is not great, right? I mean, I don't know what to do about that. We can, like, I don't know if that's like, yeah, whatever. I mean, whatever we decide, we can if people don't like the time, we can raise it maybe on the mailing list. That way everybody sees it sort of asynchronously and we can try to find a new time. It's almost like there's no good times, but just because it gets late for people in Europe and early for people here and really late for people in India, so.
It's not yet late for Europe, but.
What? Oh, I guess it's not that late there. What time is it there now?
It's 5 p.m., but even 6 p.m. is not that late for Europe.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, honestly, I was very surprised to see the meeting anchored in UTC instead of being anchored into a US time zone or a European time zone, and therefore moving with daylight saving. That's the first time I'm seeing it.
I'm not sure that was intentional.
I don't think it was intentional.
Yeah, but it's sort of like once it happened, it was already so much confusion. We didn't want to like necessarily introduce more confusion. Okay, well, we are almost 5 minutes in here, so why don't we get started? We have plenty of people online. I'll display the the agenda. Can you hear me still?
No, we can.
Yeah. Now we can. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. They said, no, we can't, which was kind of funny. Okay, Tal, actually, I can not display the agenda if you want to be full screen, since you're just talking.
Oh, yes. Good morning, everybody. Good evening. So the announcement is this, that from next week, I will be to Thieleron@google.com. And it's a very emotional time for me. I love being here.
So Charles,
And,
just to make sure you're
You're
in and
breaking
out.
it out.
You're in
Yeah.
and out. Yeah. I mean, we can hear you, but you're in and out.
All the important things you said were blank.
Yeah, you
Oh.
you started and then your voice dropped off and then it came back.
Let me see. Everything seems to be connected. Does it sound stable now?
Yes.
Okay, let's try. So yes, from next week, I will be, instead of tlaron at redhat.com, I will be tlaron at google.com. So I am switching employers. Some things will not change. I am continuing to work on Nefio. Of course, my opinions will completely change. No, I'm just kidding. I am just kidding. I have been very fortunate at Red Hat to. Red Hat in general is a very special company, right? Everything we do is open source and upstream, and I believe that will continue with my work at Google as well. So, and in many ways, my opinions will not change. There are things that I've experienced even before I worked for Red Hat. I was working in this domain, and you can teach an old dog new tricks, but I'm an old cat, I think. So obviously, our rules right now, the structure is that the co-chair cannot be from the same company, Google. So I will have to step down from co-chair as of next week. What this exactly means and what's going to happen, at the end of the day, the TSC decides the structure. So it would perhaps be a good idea to raise TSC what happens when a co-chair resigns, exactly how they want to handle it. I am sure things will be okay. And I will continue to be participating, even if I don't have the formal co-chair role to the same degree, I believe. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, let's continue and dive into really important and interesting stuff on the agenda.
Oh,
All right,
Cal, I didn't know
well,
that that allows you to actually not just change your email address, but also change work for another company too. That's cool. Very flexible.
Yes.
Congratulations, I say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy to have you on board, Tal. And so the other folks from Red Hat, I assume, are going to continue to participate and maybe step up. Is there a point person from Red Hat? I think you've sort of been the point person. How do we want to, is there any transition, or we just keep going as we are, and the folks that are involved who have also contributed a lot jump in?
I think it's just me and Bala. I think I'll let Bala speak. I think we'll continue to do whatever we're doing.
Yes, I think so. I think there's no change at this point of time from our side. So
Okay,
we'll
awesome.
continue to do. Yeah.
And we'll keep
Awesome.
our Red Hat email, actually.
All right. Cool. Thank you, Tal. Yeah, like Tal said, we don't know. I don't think it's written what we do in this situation. In the Kubernetes world, we take the next person in the election, which would be Wim, if he's still interested. And then, but it's really, we have to ask the TSC, I think, because we don't have it written down anywhere what we do.
It is written down, actually. There is.
Oh, it is. What does it say? I guess I missed that.
I mean, I read through that a while back in sometime in September, but there is actually a written down procedure. I need to find the doc.
Okay.
The
If you don't
TSC
mind-
has done that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If you don't mind tracking that down, or maybe Tal can track it down, since he's the one creating the drama, and we'll not that there's real drama. We'll figure it out from there. Okay. Thank you. Awesome. Let's go to the next item on the list. I will share that again. So the next item was mine. I just wanted to have something of a discussion of, so there's two things on my mind, right? One is I still have to catch up on the last meeting. I missed the last meeting, so I was out. but I know there was talk about the event and how it went, and I'm very curious about that, what people's thoughts were there, but I unfortunately haven't had a chance to watch it yet, so hopefully today I'll be able to. But I know that two things that came out of that, or one thing that came out of that was we need more input from SIG network architecture around things like CRD design. That was the thing that I was most trying to make clear to Sana and Kaushik, which I think they're very responsive. So Sana went plans to get some feedback from the different telcos around the way I see it. A big part of what we need to do in our design, we're trying to figure out two things in the design of the CRDs. One is sort of where what things are invariant across what dimensions. So what pieces of information are invariant across the cluster, what pieces of information are invariant across the function, like, and which pieces vary. And the pieces that vary, like who owns that information, what part of the organization in most cases. And part of the reason for that structuring is when we build the CRDs, part of what we're trying to do is kind of codify the separation of concerns such that, like, people who control, you can give in Kubernetes, you can give access authorization based on the resource. So if we have, say, a UPF class and we have a package that in my model, the UPF class refers to a package reference. And then you have a sort of UPF, the model that we did in the workshop was UPF class, which is sort of the very broad shape of the function, and then a sort of set of configurations of a UPF that includes, here's the class, and here's the networks it connects to in any given cluster, just by name. So the idea was that the class is sort of some sort of one part of the organization that decides on the vendor, and then it creates a class that associates it with that particular vendor's package and that particular version of that vendor, and maybe creates some, I don't know, in other models, and I don't know if this is appropriate in the network functions, you have a sort of t-shirt sizing potentially, or you have different classes in storage class tend to be like, it's a spinning disk versus it's an SSD, right? These are very broad, wide sweeping characteristics about it. So like, I don't know if a class would be, I don't know enough about these things. And this is where I think a bunch of you probably do, but we also need input from the telco, well, some of you are from the telcos, but from the SIG1 group around that information model, and who owns what in the organization, so that we can allow sort of each step in the process, you can allow one group of people to define the palette of selections that the next group of people can choose from and customize. That's one aspect of what we're trying to figure out. And the other aspect is where the variance is introduced, so that we can sort of associate the variance with the right thing. So maybe the CNI type is associated with the node pool in the cluster, that you configure every node in that node pool the same way, at least in the GKE. That's what we mean by a node pool. I think other cloud providers and vendors, and maybe Cal can talk, or somebody can talk about OpenShift. Like, we have this concept of a node pool that's a particular node configuration. And so something like CNI type might be associated with a node pool. So maybe we need some modeling of a node pool, and that when a network function gets targeted at a particular cluster and a particular node pool in that cluster, maybe then we can pull that information from that CNI type. Right now we put it in this cluster context object, that's not really a very sophisticated model. It's more to demonstrate the mechanisms. So those are the kind of questions I want to sort out over the next, I don't know how long, however long it takes.
Because I think, John, we need multiple CNI types per cluster, in my view. So we need multiple types because some people use SRIOV, but then other interfaces use IP-VLAN or MAC-VLAN. So we need, probably you need to, when we discover or install the cluster, we probably need to say this cluster has support for this type of CNIs. And then you can use it in the selection when you do the placement. You can basically use it as a way to, as a criteria to select as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So generalizing that, right? The idea is also figuring out. It's this thing we've talked about in the past of sort of advertising capabilities and declaring requirements for capabilities, and then a big scheduling problem to put them together. So that's but we have to, and so it's like, yeah, exactly. So those are the kind of things we need to sort out and write down and figure out the structure of those CRDs that enables the flexibility in the right dimensions. Looks like we have it in a hand here, Alec.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Wim just said. I mean, there will be multiple CNI support for a specific Kubernetes cluster, SRIOV, MAC-VLAN, OVS. And that's what we actually discussed and demonstrated when we brought external network operator demonstration in SIG Automation, that we have a concept of connection points, which is a custom resource definition, which exhibits the networking characteristics for a particular network interface. And that can have attributes like supported CNIs for that particular interface. For example, it could be SRIOV or a PCI div or OVS or MAC-VLAN. So those kind of, we can, and it is in a custom CRD form, so we can use that for Kubernetes operators who can perform operations based upon those type of CRDs and stuff like that.
So yeah, I remember that. I remember right now that you bring it up, and that's great. And I was providing that as an example, but I think just 1 second. One thing I would like to propose is that we start a document that starts to just list out what are all these different factors, and just try to start answering these questions about what those, like right now we made up some CRDs to demonstrate concepts, really, and they're incomplete, and we have existing prior art like this that we may be able to utilize. So I think that would be my proposal for now. Tal, what do you think?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back. I don't mean to distract, but the idea of which node is, I have some ideas about it. One aspect is actually the node selector mechanism in Kubernetes is quite powerful. There is, you can select using Boolean logic according to many aspects of it, but possibly the most useful one is labeling. You can label nodes and then apply things according to labels, and nodes can have multiple labels. However, there's no convention for labeling, right? There's no standard for how to label. You can do anything you want. I think it would be very useful to have a convention in FEO. That is, that we know certain labels, how the label string is constructed, and how we're going to do it in advance, because cluster installers can make sure to put those labels in place. In my planter POC, I actually took that as a very important part, because when you put all the resources together, you can actually define nodes and also define the workloads at the same time. And it could be the same label in the same kind of document, right? So I think that could be a very important thing we can do. But there's also a tricky aspect to this as well. You use node selectors on pods. That is what is being placed. All the other resources in Kubernetes are not placed, right? A network attachment definition is not assigned to a specific node, neither is a service. those have to do with what the pod is actually, where it is located. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there, right? Because if you're creating a network attachment definition, you kind of have to know which pod is going to use it. And those kind of disconnects are, they emerge from your workload structure itself, according to the selectors you use and everything, but they're not exactly by design. I think with the way we're approaching things in FEO, it's much more by design, right? We have an idea which component is using which network. So these are the kind of things I think we're going to need to discuss. And it's part of my idea that one of the things that FEO needs is kind of a Multis network manager, right? That could have that knowledge and could create those associations for you. So anyway, I'm just thinking out loud here, but I think it's quite a big topic.
Okay, thank you. Isvan?
Just wanted to add to the multiple CNIs and the interface when workloads requests and the infrastructure provides. Just wanted to express my conviction that I don't want personally to actual CNI types would be part of that interface. It would be nice if it would be a higher level requirements, but the workloads are required, and each and every Kubernetes cluster operator can decide by which CNI will they actually implement those requirements or fulfill those requirements. It's just, and that I think that relates to this your Multus manager or higher level CNI manager. That's it. And
So,
regarding the labeling, go on. That's another.
So, what sort of characteristics would that be? Like, would be like latency, throughput.
Yes.
Whether there's some tunneling or not. I don't know. I'm curious how those would be expressed.
Those, and for example, things like, do I, as a workload, as a CNF, want to consume the network devices, or want to access this interface via a kernel network device, or do I want to use some user plane code like DPDK and I don't know, use a PCI ID or something like that? So how the workload will access this device? That is also, of course, the workload. It's a natural requirement. But yes, exactly, things like that. And of course, one of the the main requirement is, who else do I want to be connected to? Do I want to be connected to some existing physical network in the infrastructure? How can I express, because I don't know the name of the networks that are present in a particular operators, I mean CSP, communication service. I don't know what are the networks in AT&T's network, in AT&T's infrastructure. So that is one thing. Or the other thing is that CNFs who have these virtual interfaces want to talk about other CNFs. Both of them were deployed by Nephew. In that case, we can express that I want to connect to those packages or capped package deployments that are matching this label selector, for example. That can be one thing.
Is that what so forgive my ignorance here, but that last one, like, isn't that what like an N4 or an N6 or an N3 or whatever? Isn't that what it means? It's like which interface, which network functions are communicating over which one?
Sort of, but if I have a UPF, I have a UPF that will most probably want to communicate with one particular instance of an SMF, not all of the SMFs. And the N4 only says that this is the interface. These are the messages between the UPF and the SMF. And so basically the underlying physical network will be segmented. So most probably not everybody will be able to communicate with everybody else. So it is not a full mesh network, and we have to live with that, at least so far. Most probably IPv6 might help with this, but this is the reality for now. Networks are segmented.
So then the way I was cheating in the workshop is that I would assume that the UPF and the SMF that are defined in the same 5G core topology resource are the ones that talk to each other. But we can there's a bunch of other hands. So I should, and I don't understand because I thought the hands, they seem to be out, like it doesn't seem to give me an order. I don't know who's next because I thought
It is Ravi.
It's
is?
Ravi next, yeah.
Yeah, I'm also not sure who's next because I'm driving. This time is a little bit odd for me. Yeah, so this is John. I'm basically getting back to your comment, like on having a document that kind of elaborates on this information models and CRTs and so on, because I'm a little bit I'm trying to understand, what gets done in the architecture versus what gets done in this group, because when I see a 5G core, it's always tightly connected to the RAN system that it tries to serve, right? And RAN systems can be deployed in different scenarios. It could be private 5G or in outdoor, macro, small cell, indoors, whatnot, right? And for each one of these, you have different you will end up with different set of core requirements, right? In terms of all the resources, CPU, memory, or need for accelerators, security, networking, and all that. So so I'm assuming that because right now even the R1 document I see it's at a very high skeletal level, right? And the assumption is for free 5G. So it's not really taking those deployment into consideration. So I mean, so what part of this document that you are talking about would be done? Exactly what kind of problems will be would you try to address here? Because the implementation right now is pretty much kind of the back of the envelope kind of thing. I mean, to kind of demonstrate the concept kind of a stuff, right? But not real takes into deployment aspects into consideration, which I mentioned. So what is that? What did you have in mind with the document as such?
So what I was thinking is, while it, somebody's got background noise. Everybody, I don't know how to put this. Everybody is busy, and I guess it's important to me and to this group to continue making progress towards delivery, and we have to do that in a way that's reduces dependencies on other groups, and there's sort of certain information. I guess it's about who drives it, and like I'm seeing us as driving the process and bringing in SIG1 consulting and asking questions and trying to get input from SIG1. And SIG1 right now is going in, like, based on the meeting, Sana's going to go back to the community and ask about some of these things that we just talked about, like what does the organizational structure look like, who makes decisions about what parts of the entire deployment, the full stack, right? There's a big stack and there's lots of people making lots of decisions about when one little workload gets running on there, it's got 100 inputs or 200 inputs or 500 inputs, and different people made decisions about each one of those inputs or sets of them anyway. And so, like, how does that all come together? In different organizations, it's different. And so we're not going to come up with a perfect model, but we need as much input there as we can. But I think we can still continue to move forward on identifying kind of what those chunks of information are, and how we might start to structure it in parallel. And so that's what I was hoping for from the document, is sort of like, right now we have I think there's a document out there, and I talk about, here's this UPF CRD, here's the UPF class, here's the UPF capacity. Like, there will be a bunch of other similar information, and yes, we hope that will come out of SIG1, but I think that we can collaborate. Right now, a lot of the people on this call are probably also in SIG1. So it's sort of like we can kind of collaboratively and iteratively drive that process, is what I'm thinking with that SIG. So I think that's one thing. I think that the other thing that, whether it's the same document or different document or whatever, Tal brought up labels in a label schema, effectively, conventions around labels. I think that's a good thing to start writing down the ideas and thoughts. I mean, a lot of this is just like putting things on paper that we've talked about so that we can make some, you know, some iterative progress. So does that answer your question at all?
It does. It does. No, I was thinking, yeah, I mean, there are many pieces I see. I mean, we can attack in this particular group, particularly because in the documentation that you had, even for the one summit, for the participants, I mean, there are so many pieces. Like, I mean, from how do you kind of the vendors package details and customize it for the specific operator deployment and you know and so there are a lot of these orthogonal pieces, I'm sure, but what I'm saying is that when you define the CRDs, probably you could have placeholders saying that this is something that needs to come from the architecture, this is something that we can define here in that workflow, and then that gives you a clear distinction exactly on, you know, what we are looking for from the SIG 1.2 input. Right now it seems to be a mixed word, so that's what I was trying to get a clarity on. So
No, it is a little bit mixed in, and I think what you just said though makes, like, part of what we're trying to do is sort that out, right? And so we'll figure out, and it's about talking is just very loose and abstract, and if we can write things down, then people can criticize it more easily. If they can no, this is totally wrong. And we can.
Ravi's point. Sorry, I want to make sure that I didn't raise my hand, but because this is related to what Ravi was raising. So are we going to take those use cases, the R1 use cases? Is there going to be like that will get mapped to some requirements? I mean, I'm looking at like the traditional company model, right? Hey, it becomes like a requirement with its some user stories or epics mapped to it with some acceptance criteria. Because when I look at things like CRD and all, it seems like it's an artifact coming out of this group, which probably needs to map those requirement or those user stories. That's the way my mental model is.
Yeah, we talked about that a little on Monday. Like, ideally, I would like to see it. I mean, we have a very high level sketch from SIG 1, and then, you know, we can respond to that with a more detailed, okay, here's how we would do that.
Yeah, that is what I was saying.
The thing is, we're not in a company, so it's a little bit hard. I can't go to SIG 1 and say, you must, you know, we can't do anything until you deliver this document by this time. I can't do that.
No, so, yeah, it can be a back and forth exchange, actually, which actually clarifies their use case. Hey, this is what you were thinking, and this is the requirement you're trying to actually fulfill. And so it's more like, yeah, that's how it works usually. It doesn't happen in one shot.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's part of this as well. We may need several documents, but we should probably be taking notes on this. Who's next in line? I can't.
I think it was
me.
Me.
It's Bala. It's Bala. No, you're next. Sorry.
Okay. Thanks, man. So with all this section, I kind of forgot what I wanted to say, but anyway, it's more about we are talking about CRD definitions, and we are also discussing about persona factors in the operators. So I think from we talked about different CNIs and cluster could support it. Absolutely, that's definitely the case. But I think we should take one network function, for example, it could be UPF, and then try to understand from a vendor perspective what they do. In theory, any secondary network could be supported, let's say, for the user plane. But a particular vendor may say, okay, in our testing environment, we only have tested this with SRIOE, any other interface. We cannot guarantee performance. It's unsupported. Use it at your own risk. And we know telcos will not deploy anything that is not supported. So the point is, we need to get that vendor input here in terms of given let's tackle one. There are 20 different network functions in 5G core, but let's tackle one and try to understand from the vendor perspective how again from a different vendors. We are lucky to have different vendors here in the nephew. Understand how exactly they support that from a deployment model perspective, and also try to understand from the telco's perspective how the different actors act on that. And then probably once we do that, probably we can come up with the different levels of CRDs that you were mentioning, John, that fits at different levels. And if we tackle it that one at a time, that probably we'll have a better understanding.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that we're hoping to do at least the 3 UPFS and with AMF to be able to demonstrate something that has.
I don't mean we should do only one, but try to understand one and then try to do them in parallel.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
So the thing is, we need to get a lot of inputs from the vendors and telcos, and we need to do that. Again, there's a point of how we coordinate this with SIG1.
Yeah, right. Okay. So I found the reason I suggest a document is just because it's how I tend to work, is I write documents that are half-assed and then get people to say things about them.
Just to highlight one point, John, because the secondary interface could be MAC VLAN or IP VLAN, but most likely a vendor may say, use it at your own risk. At that point of time, we know telcos will not use it.
Right. Yeah, that's a. The question is, do we bake that in? How deeply do we bake that assumption in? Like, if we can bake it in at like that, you can via a label or via some neutral mechanism fix it to a particular CNI type, versus what Istvan was saying of like, let's express the characteristics we need out of the interface. If we can do it somehow that we allow both, we allow a transition plan, or whether, that's one theory. Bala, if your hand's still raised, I don't know if you're done or we want.
I'm done. Sorry, I'm done. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's me next. Is it possible? Is it right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I was going to I dig a bit on this topic, for example, because even it can be that I know, for example, in Nokia, that a given CNF uses multiple CNI types for a specific deployment. So it's not just one. So, but my proposal is the following: is that, okay, we have a model that we defined for the POC, right? It was just done, okay, because we had the deadline. I think what I'm hearing is I see two things. One is we have the requirements that SIG1 is giving to us, right? So we have these 3 use cases, which are fairly high level, but I think the one that we are mainly focused on right now is installation and getting this thing deployed, right? Now, what I think we are doing as well is, for example, the CNI type is probably an important topic that we have to address in that, right? And there's multiple ways to do that, but what maybe is a way forward is to say, these are the problems that with the current demo, we have to somehow resolve, that we list them, and that we ask people to come up with some proposals on how that would work, right? And then we pick and choose one of them. And then let's say, okay, maybe it's not perfect, but here is the reasons why, and we selected this to start with, and let's move forward on that. That's how we make progress, in my view. So if we can potentially say or ask or identify what are those problem spaces that we have to absolutely address, then we can probably make some progress, because we can hopefully divide and conquer and have different people or different groups work out different scenarios, and whether they come up with a document or how they do that, or whether they come up with a design that gives a flow. I think let's leave that to the people on how that they want to establish that. But as such, kind of make progress on how we would tackle some of these important pieces, and maybe also classify how relevant some of these things are, because for certain person might be very important, but in reality, not everybody might see it as important. But I would say use the user stories that we need to tackle in release 1, together with the current model we have, and then identify the gaps or the problems or the things that we say, okay, we have to improve upon that, and use that as a baseline to say, okay, list them, and then people can come up with proposals to actually resolve them. Something like that, in order to make progress in this space. Otherwise, we continue to discuss.
I like that idea. I think because it just gives us a framework to hang it on. Like I can already sit and I can think, okay, here's the model we have right now, and I can probably list off 5 problems really quickly that it doesn't address this, it doesn't address that. Here's a situation where it doesn't work, or I don't understand this, and those will frame the discussion. I think that's a good idea.
I don't know how other people think, but so yeah, my idea is, okay, let's identify some of these things that we have to resolve, and then let's come up with some proposals to do so, and then we take it from there, right?
Sounds good.
Okay. Whoever's next.
It is I just want to react to Balázs. I don't want to spend too much time on this yet. I think I just wanted to add some details of my thinking. So why did I say what I said? Is one thing is that the success of Kubernetes comes, in my opinion, mostly from its flexibility. And we don't want to take this away in FEO, meaning that we definitely don't want to standardize on a handful of CNIs, that all CNF vendors has to use, I don't know, Calico, I don't know, Macmillan, and these 3 CNIs, and that's it. On the other hand, the operators of the Kubernetes clusters, the CSPs, cannot be expected to support all of the CNIs that the CNF vendors will come up with. That, okay, I want Cilium, I want Calico, I want, I don't know, Multus, I want Dan, whatever. So that is also, and we cannot expect, I don't know, Bell Canada to support all of these. So and I think that what I try to explain is the middle ground between the two, that we have a CNI agnostic expression of requirements from the CNFs, and whoever will design the Kubernetes cluster, they already know, because of this interface, what types of requirements they have to fulfill, and they can decide what kind of CNIs they will choose, if they will use, I don't know, MPLS or VRFs or whatever VLANs, whatever networking, SRv6, whatever networking technology they can use, and the CNFs shouldn't care. That was that's all I wanted to add. So that is the background of what I said.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's so if we can get there, there can be a qualification process in any given deployment, right, that qualifies with the full set of particular configurations, which I presume most of the telcos do now anyway, is a pretty extensive qualification process in their particular environment. So I agree. Like the idea of bringing cloud-based model of API consumption of the resources implies this more abstracted declaration of requirements and capabilities, and I did get for those who may or may not have been there, I mentioned this, and actually others mentioned this independently at the workshop, like for example that the relationship between 2 functions should be expressed in terms not of low-level computer networking concepts like CPU and memory, but instead in terms of like, I need to be able to get this many requests per second or sessions or whatever it is out of that network function in order to support this level of my needs. And so I think this is a similar concept, and I think that's necessary to make this whole thing work in the long run. But we'll have to figure out how to hopefully the mechanism would allow you to also, I don't know, nail it down tighter if you need to. So awesome, thank you. So it sounds like I'm seeing a lot of +1 to Wim's comments. I think that makes sense. We can write something up at the end, or somebody can put something in the notes now. We have 15 minutes left, and kind of, unless there's more people want to say on this topic, I'm thinking we can move a little bit to the next topic, which is basically what Wim said, but applied only to the demo-y stuff, not to the real product, which is like, what are the problems with the current demo? Any objections to moving on to that now? Okay, awesome. So, so I think that it makes, so I started to, with this assumption in mind, purpose of the demo is just to experiment with, demonstrate, and help explain the concepts. I started to list out things I think we should improve on the existing demo. The first thing I should have put down is
I think we have addressed that somehow already, John.
Awesome. Has that, I don't know if that's, has that been, is there a PR or somebody?
I still need to write the PR, but basically what I did is I created an Ansible playbook that installs on any VM.
But we need to test Wim. Maybe. I think we need to test.
We need to test. That's correct. Yeah. So we need to. I was going to discuss with Vich after this call and see how to move forward. Plus, I managed to get the UPF up in the meantime, but at the moment it needs privileged access. So there's a few things that we have to change already. So I already progressed from where we were, John.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
We can. So at the moment, the UPF is running for me.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Awesome.
Another addition just regarding GitHub. I'm not sure if it's relevant, but in parallel to him, we also created my team. We reproduced the demo, and we are using GitLab, the Nokia internal GitLab, as Git repos for that, and it seems to be working. It's just saying.
So then the question would be, can we actually put a little GitLab installation onto the VM so that we just remove that dependency?
Yeah. We had this idea. Sorry.
Yeah, there is a project which you can run a Docker image for a Git environment.
GitL. Is it GitL?
No, there is another one. Let me check one moment. I think someone in our team is trying to get it to work.
You mean Garrett?
Yeah, Garrett. Yeah, correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, Garrett. Okay, yeah. Garrett's like a code review system on top of Git.
No. Wait. No. I think it's still.
Yeah, like LFH Equino uses Garrett because the LF IT team told them in 2018. Well, but they have the real-time sync up to the GitHub. Yeah, but people still upload code to Garrett.
No, I think it's something else. One moment. So let me. Someone told me. I'll look it up. I'll put it in the chat. Yeah.
We can. Yeah, I'm personally like. It would be I've barely used GitLab at all, so I don't even know what's better. But like, I think it has a UI. It'd be nice to have something that has a UI so people can sort of go look at the pull requests if they want to, or the branches and things. But beyond that, I'm, and even that's not a hard requirement. So whatever whatever makes sense. I think there is I just don't know how heavy GitLab is. I think there is even already a kept package for it somewhere that I've seen somewhere. But Ravi.
Hi, John. So I think this is regarding, I think somebody mentioned about replicating what we had in the demo for the one summit. So is there some documentation that allows, that basically connects the dots from what is in the GitHub right now to kind of how to create deployments for those network FM management controllers and so on? Because I think the VMs were given already, even the one that you gave me already had those controllers running.
Yeah, there's a document. It's not super detailed, but there's a few little places where it's documented. Well, it's documented what you have to do as a manager of the workshop to create a new VM, and then there's a bunch of scripts and playbooks and things like that that actually generate the whole thing. We had that documented in order to build it, but it wasn't really documented after the fact as like what we actually built, right? So it's not necessarily the same thing.
Exactly, that's what I thought. There's a gap there, yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that could be useful.
John,
to
you
do
did
as
have
well,
something
but-
for the workshop participants as well, a write-up for the workshop participants as well to go through too.
What's that, Bish? I'm not following.
I thought you also had some instructions for the workshop participants to follow as well.
Oh yeah, once it's all set up, yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
I thought what Ravi was asking about was, is there something that describes how you actually build out that environment?
Exactly,
so-
the controllers basically. You have
okay.
like 3 or 4 controllers running in the Nephew cluster.
They're all just
That was
installed
not
as
clear.
a kept package. So it's very similar to the installation. If you go to Nephew POC, yeah, we can update. If you go to yeah, you're right. We should update that to show people, here's how you would do it in your own. If you didn't take the pre-canned demo environment, here's how the pre-canned demo environment is set up. That should be
Exactly.
documented as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I want to do the same to show my internal team the demo, and I want to do it from the scratch. So just want to know how.
That's what I did. I created an Ansible playbook to do that, but we have to review it. But I shared the link in one of the Slacks. So that's what I did when I made progress. I basically created an Ansible playbook to install the whole thing. And then I progressed with where we were. So that's what I did in the meantime. So if you run to the playbook, I can share the link, but we have to review and test it. It's not well tested and stuff like that. But
Okay. So that includes setting up basically the Nephew management components.
everything,
right?
everything. So basically, you
Okay.
assume you basically spin up a VM of some sort. At the moment, I'm assuming Ubuntu still, but we can change that. And then it deploys everything in it. So all the environment kept, kubectl, it creates the repos, it does create the clusters, even interconnects them in the meantime, and runs, sets up the whole environment so that you can start the README as is in the One Summit. So that's basically what I tried to do.
That's awesome. So that right now does it on GitHub still though, right? With that same personal access token, which that's going to expire, and I don't want to keep.
No. So in the playbook, I'm saying please give a personal access token, and someone has to fill it in, and then I'm using it. So it's basically it's used as an environment variable. So it's customized so that people can tailor it to their own environment.
Okay.
Oh, that's cool. Which
And
means we
I'm
don't
not.
have to.
Yeah, so I'm not saying is all the customization sufficient. I'm not saying that that's the case, but I was able, and a colleague of mine was able to reproduce that whole thing in its own environment without with his own personal keys and what have you.
That's awesome. Okay, good. So,
but it's far from perfect at the moment. But I think that's what I try to do is replicate it in such a way that everyone can do it on its own, not be dependent on its on the environment that we have.
Okay, great. So all right, so I'm going to do this packaging. So in review, I'll just say in review.
Yeah, I'm going to discuss with Ubuntu, but yeah, Tal, I think I agree. Ubuntu is a way, but my plan is to make the script flexible. We can do RHEL or Fedora or anything, any Linux distribution that people like, or CoreOS of that matter, and Podman instead of Docker. So my goal is to make those scripts customizable, that we can do all of that stuff, and you're not dependent on a single environment.
Okay. And then we'll say UPF fixes. But then there's an issue of
privileged access is my issue right now. So at the moment, it's so UPF starts, but I'm getting stuck that it injects those interfaces in the UPF and it needs privileged access. So we probably need to change some of the manifest to do so, or there's another way of doing it. But at the moment, it gets stuck. I put it on Slack so it's stuck with privileged access mode required. I can actually show it.
That's okay. We just have a few minutes. Like, let's try and get through this list, and then we'll.
Yeah.
The other, obviously, add SMF and AMF. Document how to build it. The other thing is, it would be really. So I talked. I don't know if they're here. I think Simon is here. Kurmatic, who's involved in the community, was interested in this, and Sandeep did a demo previously with this. Like, I'm wondering if we can start to think about an infrastructure example so that we can demonstrate deploying clusters and then deploying the workloads on the clusters. Of course, if those clusters are living within, if they're kind clusters living on the VM, we would need our own controller to do that, or I don't know if there's already one implemented in Cluster API or something. There probably is. We might be able to integrate that to it. We also could potentially integrate something that creates something in a cloud, although you wouldn't be able to register back to the repo if it's the repo is running in the VM host, so it gets complicated. And so I wanted to open that discussion anyway. And then one of the issues we have with that is that right now, and I think I was curious, I think I saw Sandeep on here, how he solved this. Currently, package deployment controller, as it's written, targets clusters. And of course, in this, at least in my view of how cluster creation works when managed via KRM, you have a single cluster that represents, and it might even be the same as the Nephew cluster, that contains controllers for provisioning those workload clusters. And so what you're doing is actually creating multiple instances of the same package within the same cluster with different names, as opposed to taking a package and fanning it out across a set of clusters. That's not what package deployment controller does today. That is what a function that would be available in the eventual underlying Porch controllers that we're working on. But I was curious, Sandeep, if you're here still, I think what you did in your demo to solve that problem.
Yeah. I could not get, can you please repeat the last statement, last question?
Yeah, so the cluster, the targeting in the package deployment controller right now works on a cluster selector. I think that one of the documents I talk about the idea of sites and a site selector, which you could also add, but I wasn't sure how you handled the provisioning of clusters fanning out in we only have a minute left, less than a minute left, so maybe we can take it to Slack.
Okay.
But any other quick comments before we go, since we're out of time? All right, so then go ahead, Simon.
Oh yes, yeah, I exactly. John and I, or a couple of us from our guys, we talked yesterday, and I think we'll prepare like a little use case. I think we will run into the same issue, John, so I don't have an answer for that yet. But certainly I think it's interesting. And also to one of the comments you mentioned before, so we have like a component called machine controller that does exactly what you described, where it takes in a cluster API spec, which has like a subset of specified fields, and then it provisions something at AWS, DigitalOcean, Google Cloud, VMware, vSphere, OpenStack, and a long list of others. And we will like extract like one part for it to show in like a POC in hopefully the upcoming weeks. That's it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. So next steps that I will work on or we'll start a discussion somewhere about the problems with the existing model, and we'll iterate on that. So thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
Thanks, John.
Thank you,
Thanks.
John. Thanks a lot.
Thanks
Bye.
very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.